And we're asking, are pensioners being betrayed? Get your calls in for this one now. Chancellor Rachel Reeves has announced changes to who will get winter fuel payments. It means that millions of pensioners will no longer get the benefit. This is part of Labour's plans to plug holes in the public purse left by the Conservative Party. Now, the winter fuel payment is worth between £100 and £300 a year, not a small amount of money. Currently, anyone above the state age pension qualifies for it. Last year, over 11 million pensioners received it. But let's take a look at who will still be able to get those winter fuel payments after the Chancellor's changes. So from winter 2024, if you live in England and Wales, this is, you will now only be eligible for it if you are over the state pension age and receive one of the following benefits. So income support, income-based job seekers allowance, income-related employment and support allowance, pension credit and universal credit. In Scotland, responsibility for winter fuel payments is going to be handed over to the Scottish Government in September. It's going to be replaced by a Holyrood equivalent and is yet to be confirmed whether they are going to make similar changes. Andy, do you think that pensioners are being betrayed because of this?
I feel betrayed finding out there have been millions of pension-age people who have been taking this money and spending it on themselves at a time when they know that younger people are struggling so terribly to buy a house, let alone heat it. The idea that you would sit in your cosy house, I'm not talking about pensioners who are really struggling financially here, but pensioners who don't need that money, who are sitting in very cushy, cosy homes, who are taking that money and basically effectively saying to younger people who could never dream, myself included, of owning a home, by the way, you're also going to pay our bills. I think it's extraordinary that people have been even accepting this money. It's a bribe from the Tory government to try and maintain the vote base that they have with that particular generation.
Well, we also had a problem with the cost of living crisis and people choosing between heating and eating. Mike, what do you think?
Well, I think it's far too sweeping a statement to say there's loads of pensioners sitting around in comfortable homes.
But those are the ones we're talking about.
No, we're not. We're talking about the little old women that I see in Morrison's supermarket who are literally examining the cost of every item they put into their basket because they simply can't keep up with the cost of living in this country. And I think for a Labour government to announce this on the same day as they're giving young, healthy, highly paid doctors a 22.5% pay rise, but they're taking that money off pensioners who are struggling, some of whom don't get more than £12,000. Some of whom don't get more than £12,000 a year.
To the benefit of older people
Some
who
junior
will rely
doctors,
on the
Andy,
NHS and those doctors more than anyone else in society. If we don't pay our doctors properly, we're not looking after our elderly properly.
Some junior doctors, as you will know well, Andy, get up to £70,000 or £75,000 a year. They're not junior, they're into their 40s and they're developing a career. I think to take money off pensioners who are struggling like mad in this country, particularly after, you know, the cost of living squeezes, and giving it to those doctors.
Struggling like mad. They're living very comfortable lives with a
What's
lot
the
of
percentage?
money.
I suppose, Mike, the doctor's criticism might be pensioners have had the triple lock. They didn't get a triple lock in their wages.
But we're talking about minimal amounts of money here, £12,000 or £13,000 a year for a pensioner. Some of the doctors, as I say, are earning 5 or 6 times that already and are on a 22.5% increase. I think it's terribly unfair, and I can't understand why there's not more outrage that a Labour government, you know, there to look after everybody, is penalising pensioners.
OK, let's now speak to Caroline Abrahams from Age UK. Caroline, thank you very much for joining us. What do you think about the government's plans to limit the winter fuel payments? They're not getting rid of them entirely.
Yeah, good morning. Well, we strongly oppose it. And the reason is a simple one, that there are about 2 million older people who are really going to lose out as a result, who really can't afford it. That's the problem. Both your guests have got an element of truth to what they say. There are some older people who are better off and they can afford to lose the money, and we're not worried about them. But it's those people who are going to really suffer that we're concerned for. It's the people who don't get pension credit because they don't claim it. That's almost 1 million people. And there's another 1 million people who are just above the line for being able to claim it, and they're pretty hard up too. And then there's a third group of people who live in energy inefficient homes, who are not very well, who have to have the heating up high, and they're really going to suffer. And you add all those groups together, you get about 2 million people, and they're the ones that we should be doing more to help. It's a big problem that this policy is coming in so quickly this winter, because it hasn't given anyone time to prepare. So it hasn't given us time really to help more people claim pension credit, and it hasn't helped older people put money aside, knowing they were going to have to find probably another £200 or £300. So that's our UK.
What would you like the government to do, knowing that they have quite a big financial deficit or a hole that they need to plug?
Yeah, we'd like them to think again. I mean, we totally accept that there's a problem with the public finances and more money has to be found. And it may be actually that better off older people need to make a contribution, but not this way. And the reason for that is because they won't notice. If you're well off and you've lost 200 or 300 quid, you won't notice it. But if you're right at the bottom, like some people are, you will really suffer a lot. And that's the problem with this policy. So we think there has to be a better way.
Well, that sounds like you would be fine with it being means tested then, to make sure that the wealthier pensioners aren't getting it.
Well, the problem with means testing, as I've alluded to but haven't gone into properly, is it doesn't work very well with older people. So of all those benefits you showed, the one that really matters is pension credit. That's the main one that qualifies you. That's the one most people would apply for. And the difficulty is, for the last 10 years or more, 1 in 3 of all the older people who are entitled to it haven't got it. And that's because they don't claim it.
Okay,
and you have to fill in a...
Would it not encourage people to claim the benefits that they are due then? Wouldn't this be of benefit to those individuals?
Well, that's what people wondered when we changed the rules around the TV licence, the free TV licence, about 5 years ago. And you know what? It didn't make any difference. It didn't increase the take-up. And that had mammoth publicity through the BBC at the time. So those numbers have remained pretty static. And about, I think it's actually 880,000 older people are missing out on that benefit. And when you think about it, it's not that surprising, because there are a lot of older people who are not very well, who don't know about this benefit, who wouldn't manage to fill in the form. They're on their own. You need someone to help you do it, and not everyone's got that. So you can see why the take-up is so low. And that's why we oppose means testing, because the problem is it still results in lots of the poorest pensioners missing out.
Caroline Abrahams from Age UK, thank you very much for your time there. Going to the calls now. Kim from Surrey, what do you think about the winter fuel payments being reduced?
I am absolutely furious. Absolutely furious. We're talking about benefits there, being mean tested. What about all the older people on attendance allowance, or those on PIP who have got disabilities? Mm-hmm. I have worked in social... I'm sorry, Storm, I'm so angry. I've worked in social care for the last 35 years. I've been a carer, registered manager, adult social services. I've been in and out of people's homes for the last 30 years. Older people will heat one room up. They won't heat the rest of the house. They'll sleep in that chair because it's warm there. They won't go into the kitchen for food or drink because it's too flipping cold. Mm. These people will end up in hospital. Then you'll say they're taking all the beds. But, hey, the junior doctors can earn their 22% pay rise then. I
think certainly the timing between those two things is going to be very difficult for the government. But Kim, what about Andy's argument that all this time there have been incredibly wealthy pensioners that have been able to benefit from this £100 to £300 a year? How do we dish out the winter fuel payments in a way that those that are vulnerable and need it get it, and those that aren't and don't need it don't?
Well, it is difficult, but maybe if you had a cut-off point, if your income's $50,000 a year.
Okay, like your pension's worth over $50,000 a year?
Yeah, if you've got an income of your pension, private pensions over $50,000 or something. This is just off the top of my head.
Yeah, that's quite high, Kim, but thank you very much for your call.
You know how much it is to live. If you live on your own, a lot of people are on their own. They don't have other money coming in. People have paid into their state pension all their life.
Yes, I understand that, but I think a lot of people at home will think 50,000 when the average across the UK is 34,000 is quite a high threshold.
Very few people earning pensions of 50,000 a year.
That's what I would have thought.
1 or 2%, believe me, at the top, you know.
Which means the majority of them would still be getting the winter fuel payments, even those that potentially, Kim, may fall into the bracket of not necessarily needing it.
A more effective way actually might be to look at council tax bans. It's not perfect, it's still clumsy, but if you're living in certain council tax bands that means you're not living in a big flashy house, to use everyday terms, then actually maybe you're still eligible. I'm talking
but hold
about
on, then you're going
that...
to penalise the individuals that maybe bought their house a while ago, the house price has gone up, and they're living in homes that are hard to heat, that are large.
I wouldn't say
very hard to
penalise.
maintain.
I wouldn't say penalise. I would say recognise the fact that they have a house that has ballooned in value, and maybe it's time to sell it and move somewhere smaller.
When they've lived there all their lives. Kim, thank you very much for your call. Michelle from London, how do you feel about this?
First and foremost, I love your dress. That is your colour, hon.
Oh, thank you.
Secondly,
And I love a compliment, Michelle, so you can call any time. What's your
There
thoughts on
you
the
go.
winter fuel payments?
I don't think that they're hard done by, just because, quite honestly, I respect the fact that some of them were working, in their mid to late teens and have worked for decades, and are now, obviously at the age where they want to actually collect on their pension. But their money was spent 5 ways from Sunday, probably back like in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. It's a different pot of money that's coming through to kind of help fund their lifestyle. And then also, they have the benefit of most of them being able to buy their homes back in the day, whereas, a lot of young people, me being one of them, I'm not looking to buy a home. I rent a very nice place. But, people are having difficulty getting on the property ladder. It's not like they're having to, in the middle of this kind of like living crisis, have to pay exorbitant rent. Their houses have long been paid for. And I also think that it was a wise strategy of the new chancellor to actually give the doctors a 20% raise, just because if they're actually reducing that benefit for the elderly people who are better off than some of the really poor elderly people, we're going to need doctors come winter, because those are the main people that are going to be going straight to the hospital. So I think can you imagine how much worse it would be if the doctors did a strike and the benefit from the pensioners were actually reduced as well? That would be an absolute catastrophe. And just one final point for the record. It would be nice if there was some kind of benefit for people that may be in a similar position to me. I'm 43. I am unmarried. I have no kids. We never get any kind of tax credits or any kind of benefits for us kind of being individual. It's always for the families and single parent this and multiple parent this, that, and the other. But for people that have, done all right for themselves but aren't earning an absolute killing, we never get any kind of beneficial handouts.
Interesting point that you make, that actually there's other groups that are being forgotten about here. But just going back to your doctor's point, Michelle makes an interesting point, and actually one of the biggest offences of giving the 22% raise to the junior doctors is that the people that rely on the doctors the most are the older in society, are the most vulnerable, and therefore it would benefit them greatly to have doctors that were there rather than leaving to Australia.
I couldn't understand this political argument. The reason we've got to give the doctors, junior doctors, some earning £50,000 or £60,000 a year, a big pay rise is to stop them going on strike again. I think that's absurd. When you look at the fact that
it's to stop them leaving.
No, it's to stop them going on strike again. That's exactly what the government said.
They're going on strike because the pay is so bad that people are leaving for Australia.
The pay isn't bad, honestly. For junior doctors, it's not that bad. And I think it's absurd to say we don't want to go on strike again, so give them all this money. They shouldn't have been going on strike for an unobtainable rise of 35%.
Where the level of qualification those people have to be a junior doctor, and the hours they work and what they do to keep us healthy, well and alive in hospitals. You think 50 grand
and
is
extend
too much?
NHS waiting lists by withdrawing their labour on a regular basis over the last 3 years.
Because they're not paid properly.
Well, I don't agree with that.
Michelle, thank you very much for your call. Michael from Warwickshire, what's your view on this?
Good morning. First time I've ever made a call. Good morning to you.
Congratulations, thank you.
Thank you. Basically, my wife and I, we are both pensioners. My wife is 79 this year, and I have just turned 77. 2 years ago, I had my kidney, prostate and bladder removed, thanks to the NHS, who are absolutely incredible. Thank you. I am getting attendance allowance, which I need because of hospital visits, car parking, etc., etc. We need this winter payment. We put it aside. We get £300 and we put it aside to pay for our February and March electricity and gas bill. Now, the point I want to make is, which I didn't see was covered yesterday, all these boat people arriving in this country will be getting free gas and electricity ad infinitum.
I don't think we call it boat people. That's not what we call these. They're people coming over by small boats.
Okay, the people who come into this country by boat.
Yeah.
Right. And then are housed in hotels and everything else. They're not worried about heating, gas and electricity over the next year, 2 years, 3 years.
Well, Michael, part of the Labour's policy is to try and fast-track those processes in order to allow these individuals to work, to be able to pay for themselves, to reduce those very costs, and people are kicking up about that as well, so it's almost like they can't win.
Okay, agreed. But they're going to be housed in probably nice houses, which the young people in this country could be housed in, but they are still going to get free gas, electricity and heating bills, and they will be nice and warm during the winter. That's if we have a cold winter. Now, why isn't attendance allowance included in this July budget? That's the question I want to ask.
And I can't answer it for you, Michael, but I'm sure there are lots of other sort of benefits and people that perhaps have been missed out that they will have to maybe use a bit of common sense to include later on. I don't know, Michael, but I wish you all the best. Thank you very much for your first call as well. Let's move on now.